You're live. That's what it says right here. All right. I'm 3 seconds in. Let me get a drink. There we go. Good. Hey, hope you're having a good Wednesday. Enjoying yourself. Looking at the beautiful snow. Seeing what's going on in the world. Staying home, maybe being safe. It has been a time, hadn't it? Man, it has been an interesting time. And all. Anybody else out shoveling snow today? Man, I don't know about your neighborhood, but our street's pretty snow packed. Got about 5 more inches of snow last night on top of what we already had. Went out and shoveled snow today. Didn't see any of you here with me. Of course, I wasn't at your place digging snow either. Anyway, a lot of snow being moved. Anyway, hopefully we're into a little more convenient weather in the days ahead as things warm up a little bit. Uh, and we'll look forward to I'm still looking forward to springtime. I know we're still more than a month away from the official date of spring, but I look forward to more moderate weather, I guess. Never can satisfy some of us. Anyway, glad you're with me. Let's see. Let me mention a couple of things before we get into our study and try to remember. We will plan to have services at the church building Sunday morning. We'll try to let you know any details that need to be made known, but trying to get things dried out after the busted pipe, put water into the auditorium again. None of you came down and sailed your boat. We could have baptized a lot of people. No, really, it wasn't deep enough for that, but it was, and still is to some degree, a mess. Got a lot of work going on down there, getting it cleaned up and put together, and we'll still be dealing with some of that probably for a little while yet. But hopefully the auditorium will be usable. If it's not, we'll work something else out, maybe another part of the building. But I think we'll probably be able to be in the auditorium on Sunday morning, and by Sunday morning anyway. We'll see how things go, but they're really working hard to try and get us back into shape in there. Anyway, it's unfortunate that we're having the problem at all, but that just kind of goes along when you got temperatures that have dropped as low as we've had, and pipes that have water in them. It just can be a real problem. So anyway, we'll deal with that and get that repaired, and we'll move forward from there. But things are a little bit awkward in that. Let me mention to you, talking to Larry Baldwin a while ago, he was talking about Gwen making some progress, but she just sometimes thinks she can do more than she can. Had a few incidents, but both of them, I think, getting by, managing, and all with a little help from family and so forth. But hopefully, seeing the days of improvement and better strength ahead for them. Chris Corder, that we mentioned in the hospital, he's appreciated cards and contacts that have been brought to him and all. He is home now from the hospital. Dealt with pneumonia, a heart issue that they're still dealing to some degree with, as well as needing to go in for dialysis. I think immediately be going in 3 days a week for dialysis and everything. So keep Chris in your prayers. Chris, a really nice guy, and I know he appreciates your prayers. And talked to him just recently about some of that. J.R. Hatfield had his back procedure yesterday. Haven't spoken to him yet, but I'm hoping everything went well for him and have better days ahead after the auto accident he had some time back that left him with some issues. We want him to do well. I'm sure there are others we need to mention at this time. We've got quite a few that are at home or homebound, and others. A lot of progress being made on the COVID front, I think, right now. And so we're hopeful for better days ahead. But keep these in your thoughts and prayers. We'll have more that we'll send out along the way, especially before Sunday, and of course, announcements then. Don't know whether we'll have a regular bulletin, but I'll try to get some announcements out to you. Lost my mock-up for the bulletin in my old computer, and if I'm able to get that, just say if I'm able to get the access to the information that was on it, I'll be able to share with you. And I was overlooking one other, and all was Paula's sister Claudia that we mentioned that fell and broke her shoulder. Evidently, it was pretty badly damaged. She'll be undergoing shoulder replacement surgery tomorrow, and I know she and Paula's family would be very thankful for your prayers on her behalf. Lives in Huntsville, Alabama, undergoing surgery tomorrow. Be in the hospital for a day or so, and then back home and therapy ahead. But doctor feels like this is the best course, and we'll hope for the best for her and all. And so keep these in mind, and we'll try to keep word out on these and others as we move along. Okay, our study this evening. We're 5 minutes in. That's longer than we ought to take, but 5 minutes into our study. We'll go right into our study now. We'll have a prayer at the end of our study together. James chapter 4, verse 13. Very, how do I describe this? Very unsettling in a way. The conscious observance portion of James. We really got to think a little bit about this and how we think about things and how we deal with our attitudes towards what we are, what we're doing, and what is under our control and what's not, and about our life itself and how fragile it really is. And this section deals with it very directly. Just a few verses we're going to read here this evening, but it's a very powerful, pointed section in the book of James. And so much in James is very pointed, but this is very particular and something that gives us some real pause for thought, I think, about how we consider ourselves and what we try to do and how much we feel like we have at our disposal and under our control. So let's take a few moments. We'll read those few verses and then get into our discussion here for a little while. As James writes, New King James Version, James 4, verse 13 through 17. Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go to such and such a city, spend a year there, buy and sell and make a profit. Whereas you do not know what will happen tomorrow. For what is your life? It is even a vapor that appears for a little time and then it vanishes away. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we shall live and do this or that. But now you boast in your arrogance, and all such boasting is evil. Therefore, to him who knows to do good and does not do it, to him it is sin. Two or three things in there, probably some that you stand out in your mind. The thing about life being but a vapor, we use that sometimes. We even use that at funerals from time to time. Not at the end, to him that knows to do good and does not do it, to him it is sin. That's one of those familiar passages we throw out there when we feel like somebody ought to be doing something that they're not doing. They know better about doing something. So let's get into our thoughts here this evening for just a moment. I appreciate you being with me. I see some of you signing on to the chat portion of this, but glad you're here. Glad others are watching along with us this evening. And again, I hope by next Wednesday evening we'll be able to be in the building, have our class where we can interact with one another in our discussion there a little better. And of course, continue to have the live stream for those who cannot be there yet. But let's get into this. And the discussion matters. If you picked up the notes that were sent out by email and you got those, and maybe you refer to those, but you don't need them necessarily, and follow along. If you think about it, how we approach life, we approach life with an idea that we're going to do something. We don't always know exactly what we're going to do. We don't always have our plans in mind. Some of them are just kind of put on us. You know, if I'd had my druthers, I would have never gone to school. I liked being at home. I liked staying home with my mother, and I liked being there. And all, even after my older sister went off to school, and even after the baby was born, she was actually born about that same time, but I didn't want to go to school. My mother sent me anyway, made me go. I didn't have a plan to go to school for X number of years, go to college, get a degree and so forth, and have to go to work. I didn't want to do that. I want to stay home and be taken care of. Well, there are things like that happen to us that are kind of put upon us. But in a sense, we look at our future, short or long, sometimes very short, and we make plans for our future. We say, I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do that. And that's what we get into. In large ways, we plan out our lives, especially as we get to be adults. Things like we buy insurance and life insurance. We plan out our lives thinking, well, I might not make it to such and such point. I want to leave behind something for my mate or somebody like that. But that's kind of our life planning to set about things like that. We set aside savings to be able to purchase or and deal with life expenses along the way. We make investments and hope that they will return somewhere down the road, planning for a date. And see, you buy this and 10 or 15 years down the road, maybe then it'll be worth X and we'll be able to use it. So we make plans for those kinds of things, investments and education, as I mentioned. Maybe we'll go to school or some sort of training or things like that. Or even we just have express plans. One day I'm planning to do this. I'm going to do that. As he says right here, today or tomorrow we will go into such and such city, spend a year there, buy, sell, and make a profit. We've got this all figured out. That's exactly what we're going to do. And that's what James is addressing. Now, is it wrong to think, I hope to do this. I want to do that. I'd like to get some training. I'd like to get a degree. I'd like to finish school. I'd like to get out of the third grade. Be like Jethro Bodine, spend 12 years to get through 6 grades. We'd like to think that we can accomplish things and have ideas of what we want to do. I don't think that's what James is attacking here, but we do make plans in large ways. We make plans in small ways as well. Maybe it's just daily plans. Catch yourself saying to yourself, or maybe even to others, and they'll say, "What are you going to do today?" And you say, "Well, today I'm gonna go to the grocery store. Today I'm going to go to work. Today I'm going to go to class. Today I'm going to clean the house. Today I'm going to jump off the roof." Well, don't do that. But you know what I mean. We answer with things that we are going to do and so forth, and we plan to do those things. James said that's the way we are. And he says, now I want you to think. And when he says, "Come now, you who say," he's really getting to all of us, isn't he? Come now, you who say. All right. In other words, think with me a minute, he's saying. All you who say or who make plans like this, and maybe they're just simple, arbitrary plans, things that we want to do and things we want to accomplish. Do we do that? I hope you're shaking your head this way. We do. Most any of us do. We do it all the time. Anywhere you go, I'm going to work today. Okay. That's a plan. That's what we're going to do. What are you going to do when you're there? Well, I'm going to work on this or that or whatever it might be. That's the way we work, isn't it? We do that. Suddenly you think, well, are you trying to tell me this is wrong? If you weren't thinking that, think it for a minute. Are you trying to tell me this is wrong? That's not exactly the point. That's not exactly what James is getting at. We make our daily plans. We say, here's what I'm going to do today, and make out a list of what we're going to do and try to accomplish it. And sometimes we need lists that help us get certain things done. Maybe there are things we need to buy, things we need to plan, things we need to do. Anyway, that's what I'm talking about. Because we like to have confidence in the future. And by confidence, I mean what we can look forward to, what we can expect, what we want to do, and what we want to get done. That kind of confidence helps us to be motivated, to act, to do things, and to find ourselves. But what James does here, what James does to us and for us, is to remind us that our future is not in our control. Well, then why plan anything? If the future's not in our control, why plan anything? Well, plans are not necessarily a concrete statement. It has to be this way and no other. We can take plans and we can adjust them, move them. Between our house and on I-44 going down towards Churchman, there's a lot of road work being done. Sometimes when I'm leaving office, maybe coming home, and I want my wife to be aware, I'll be home in a certain time. I'll say, okay, I'm headed that way. I ought to be home in, 15 minutes or so. Well, maybe it takes me 30 minutes because I didn't plan for somebody who doesn't know how to drive through a work zone. The way you drive through work zones is you come up between those cones and you gun it as fast as you can. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. But you can't always tell what the traffic's going to do, can you? You can't always tell when workmen are going to be holding things back, or when the traffic's going to narrow more than it has in the past. Simple things like that. You don't know what the weather necessarily is going to do to the road in days like this. And so we can make a plan. We can say, this is what I plan to do, but it's got to adjust. And that's what James is getting at here. He reminds us that our future is not necessarily in our control. It's not that we can't say, here's what I want to do, but it's a matter of it could change. It could change, and we need to be aware of that. That's why he goes into this uncertainty of life. He says, you don't really know what's going to happen tomorrow. Well, we've got ideas. Tomorrow will be a whole lot like other days have been, probably. But things could happen, couldn't they? Things could interrupt. Sometimes all it takes is one telephone call, and the whole day changes completely. Maybe even the whole direction of life changes completely. All it takes is one telephone call that you hadn't planned. You do not know what will happen tomorrow. That's why we cannot be absolute about what we think we have under our control. He then pushes the idea of the vaporous nature of life. I've got an idea. You think what you want to about this, but I've got an idea that if we knew how often we come close to even dying, we'd be afraid to go out our front door. I think I was coming home, was it yesterday, I guess, coming home yesterday. And the roads still weren't bad or anything when I was driving home, but there's snow on the sides and everything. And all of a sudden up here, the traffic in the highway ahead of me, suddenly a semi-trailer truck clips another car that evidently has slid into some ice over on the shoulder, goes sideways, spins around, goes across the freeway. Other cars are turning sideways and going this way and that. I'm coming up and I'm thinking, this is not good. I didn't know that was coming, didn't have a plan for that. I'm glad I wasn't involved in the accident itself, but immediately had to slow down, had to work around some of the things that were going on, and the semi truck trying to cross over the middle of the road in front of everybody. And you're thinking, what in the world is going on here? We do not know what's going to happen tomorrow. You think that driver of that truck thought about that, knew that was going to happen? You think the person in the car whose car got clipped thought about that? There are people that got up today thinking they were going to have a normal day and didn't even make it through the day. Now, I don't mean to be morbid. I'm just saying we don't know what tomorrow brings. We care what tomorrow brings, but we don't know what tomorrow brings. But he presses the idea of the vaporous nature of things. And if you look at it very carefully, I think we may carry a little bit too much into the vaporous nature, but he says it's here for a little while and it's gone. It's very short in duration. We read about some of those ancients that lived 900 plus years, 800 plus years, and so forth. You think about Methuselah living 969 years. Don't you know his wife had to get tired of him? Anyway, seriously, we read about some of those things and we recognize, man, the average lifespan today is pretty short. But you think about, you read about some of those Old Testament kings. And I don't know whether it was their diet or too much conflict, or some of them died in war, I know, but so many of them died at a pretty young age. Even some that reigned for quite a number of years still died at a pretty young age. And if you think about life, 70, 80, 90 years or so, maybe a little more, maybe a few more. I think, didn't I read something about France's oldest lady is 117 years old? And while to some that seems like a long time, in the great scheme of things, 117 is not that long. Anyway, but it is short in its duration. And life is fragile at its best. Just one little thing goes wrong. People pick up a virus. It makes its way into their body. A few days later, they're sick. Short time later, they're in the hospital. Then they're on a respirator, and then they die. Boy, that sounded morbid, didn't it? And I know that's a minority. That's a very few people in the broad scheme of things end up that way. But all it takes is one heart blockage. All it takes is one embolism. All it takes is one minor accident, one slip and fall, and you hit your head. And, life is fragile. I read somewhere that we're all one heartbeat away from death. I've heard it too. I don't like to think of it that way exactly, but it is fragile at best. And the other thing that he points out is that life is gone when it's gone. Then it vanishes away. When it's gone, it's gone. I know that Jesus raised some from the dead, and there were a few others raised from the dead. But generally, when somebody is gone, they're gone, and that's the way it is. So James is giving us some insight into approaching life properly. That's what he's doing. How should we be approaching life? If you recognize life is fragile, if you recognize it's not directly under our control, if you recognize these things, then how do we approach life correctly? Number one, we need to recognize arrogance for what it is. Don't get caught up in thinking we control the environment or our environment lives for us. Recognize that kind of arrogance, because it is born out of ignorance. It means I haven't considered everything that's involved or who is involved. And it builds me up, if I'm arrogant, it builds me up to thinking that I have a great control and a greater control than I could ever even begin to consider. And that makes it evil, because that puts me in the position of one who controls all the elements in life itself. But James is trying to tell us we're not the ones who are in control. Who is in control? That's where the question comes in. Instead, we ought to say, if the Lord wills, verse 15, if the Lord wills, we shall do this or that. This is a measure of submission. It's a little different than just saying I'm doing the will of the Lord. Jesus prayed in his garden prayer, not my will, but thy will be done. And it's very close akin to what we're talking about here, is that we want the Lord's will. But in this case, James is talking about when you want to do something, put it within the hands of the Lord. Here's what I want to do. I want to go to work. I want to go to school. I want to do these things. I want to go to the grocery store and get some coffee because we're out at home. He's calling on us to recognize we don't control all these things, but if it's the Lord's will, it's all right to have that desire. It's all right to have that consideration. It's all right to want to do things, to even plan to do things. That's not the problem. It's saying, but if it's the Lord's will, I'm going to do this. This is not the same as seeking what God necessarily wants me to do. That's important, and that's a different subject. But this is, here are the things I would like to do, and if it's the Lord's will, if it's God's pleasure, we'll do it. That's why we put brains in our head. We're not just puppets to follow through. We put brains in our heads to think and to act on our own, to make decisions based on what we desire, what we believe is best, what our best choices are in a circumstance. And so we are looking at what God would want in our lives, but with that is, what do we want in our lives, and hope that it pleases God in what we do. If it's the Lord's will, we'll do that. If it pleases God, if it suits him, we'll go into that. So that's a little bit different subject than saying I need to seek out what the Lord's will is for my life. That is a very important matter. But he wraps up this section of his consideration with this thought: when you know what you should do, but you don't do it. In other words, to him who knows to do good and does not do it, to him it is sin. That's one of those that we readily use. When you know what you ought to do and you don't do it, that's sinful. How many things should we have done today that we didn't do? Things that we knew we should have done, but we didn't get done. I don't think James is trying to say every time you don't get done everything that you know or you think is good and we don't get it done, then it was sinful. Thought it was interesting. Paul looked out the window. Fellow was car was out here in the road trying to get it going. His tires just kept slipping. He needed some help getting it moving forward. He kept backing up. She said, "Let's put on our coats. We'll go out there and we'll push him." We watched. He made a little progress. We waited a minute. Well, maybe he's going to make it. All right, he's not going to make it. Let's go get our coats and we'll go out there and push him. By the time we I got my coat on, started out the door. Paula said, "Never mind, you were too slow. He's gone now." I should have gone earlier. Could have helped him get moving sooner. Just getting his car rolling. Pretty simple. I think there are a lot of people doing those kind of things right now. Are things that we pass by every day and later we think, maybe I should have done that. Were we sinful in not doing it? I don't think that's exactly what James is getting at here. I can't judge what we did or didn't do. But when you know it's the right thing, do it. In other words, in this case, he's talking about when we choose to do something, are we putting it within the scope of the Lord's will and accepting whatever comes from it. I think that's what he's getting at here. Because if we find it as something that is not what God wants, has displeasure in it, then we've made a bad choice. So knowing the right thing and doing the right thing can often be very different. But at the same time, we need to always say, is this what the Lord would be pleased with me doing today? Consider the application in the context of what he's saying. Is this what the Lord wills? Or am I just clinging to my own self-indulgent determination? Sometimes we can get sort of stubborn and arrogant about that kind of thing when it really should be, I'll do this. And if it's the Lord's will, we'll live and do it. Yeah, and accept that may or may not be. And if we find it's not, then let's don't go that way. All right. That kind of goes over the text itself and what it has to say. I'm sure you would have some better things to add into it in this regard, but that's the best I can do for you in that regard. But let's look just for a few moments at the questions that are down here. Because, James' messages here have often been closely associated with Jesus' teaching, especially in the Sermon on the Mount, many of the things that he shared there. So the first question is, what does Jesus teach about tomorrow and today? Remember what he says, Matthew 6:34. Why do you worry about tomorrow? That's the question, isn't it? Why are you so worried about tomorrow? Today is the thing to take care of. It will be enough to keep you busy. I think the idea of has enough troubles is maybe gives us a wrong idea. It has enough to keep us busy, has enough challenges and opportunities for us today if we'll just follow and get involved in today. That's not forgetting about tomorrow. That's not thinking that tomorrow doesn't exist. But take care of today, and then you can better move in tomorrow. You can move into tomorrow. You try to say that fast. Okay. And that's part of what James is getting at. We get kind of ahead of ourselves rather than accepting what God has for us and what we can do today. Okay. So Jesus teaches about it. Think about today before you get all tied up and where you're going down the road in tomorrow. Okay. Question number 2. What assurances do we have concerning tomorrow? What James says, you don't know what will happen tomorrow. So what assurances do we have? 1, the writer of the book of Hebrews says that Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. The 13th chapter. We have a constant that we can lean on. The assurances of tomorrow are that the Lord will be with us, whatever tomorrow brings. I'm with you always, even to the end of the age or of time, Matthew records. So What assurances do we have concerning tomorrow? Not necessarily that it's going to be what we want it to be, but that the Lord will be with us, whatever it is. And if He's there, we can deal with whatever it brings. Number 3, if life is truly like a vapor, not a viper, a vapor, if life is truly like a vapor, why do we not treat it as such? We treat ourselves as if we are the one constant, don't we? We'll always be here. And I think we look at one another sometimes as if we will always be here. I think many of us, when we've reached a certain point in life and maybe our parents are deceased and so forth, and you think back, you never thought about the fact that they wouldn't be here. Some of you have lost mates. You never thought of the fact that they wouldn't be here. Oh yeah, we bought insurance or something, or maybe we even talked a little bit about it, but we never really thought about it. We treat life as if it is truly the constant. But I guess maybe some things that have happened in the recent year have brought to mind again how vaporous life really can be. The friends, others who have been lost and so forth. War does the same sort of thing. And so, why do we treat it as such? We shouldn't. We need to get beyond that kind of thing. Then the question number 4, and I've really already gone into this quite a bit. James teaches that we should say, if the Lord wills. How does his use differ from simply doing the will of the Lord? Well, the differentiation that I'm making, and they both rely upon what God wants us to do and have in our life. But what James is talking about is just arbitrarily doing what we want to do outside of what we might be pleasing to God. In other words, he said, I want to do this, and if it's the Lord's will, I'll get it done. If it's the Lord's will, if God desires it to be done, I'll follow that, keep with it. The other one is just simply going to God's word and saying, what does God want in my life? You think about the king, and when the word was brought to him, a book of the law is found in the temple and brought to him, and he's a very good young man, very gracious servant of the Lord. And Hilkiah sent the book to him, and he starts reading, and they had not been observing the Passover, hadn't been doing everything right, but he didn't know it. But once he found out what it was, he went to the Lord, he prayed and set the course on having the Passover and all that and so forth. And so that's about seeking to do the will of the Lord. Had he been making plans and trying to do right before God? Yeah. But then when this came along, he sought to do the will of the Lord in his life. So there is a little bit of difference in the approach to that. So it differs a little bit from simply seeking to do the will of the Lord or seeking to do, and if the Lord wills, will accomplish it. A little bit different in that regard. And I hope I made that probably muddier than I should have. Anyway, number 5. What is the difference between arrogance and confidence? I don't know whether, and I didn't look up an exact definition, but in my mind, and maybe you're thinking in this line too, arrogance is that idea, I know, and it's going to be my way. I know what's right, and it's going to be my way. Sometimes Paul will sarcastically say to me, yes, Russ, you're right. We know you're right. You're always right. I don't think I've been right for a long time. Anyway, you know what I mean. I'm just joking about some of that. We tease, we joke about those things. But arrogance is that idea of I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it my way, and no alternative. Nobody can tell me any different. I was thinking about, there was a fella in the congregation many years ago, and I was very young then, didn't know up from down, still don't. But he got upset with me about something, and he told somebody else in the congregation, a young preacher doesn't know anything. He's not going to tell me what to do. The guy was really not that sharp in some ways. Not that sharp in some ways. Very narrow in his approach to some things. Maybe that is sharp if it's very narrow, but you know what I mean. It wasn't mind wasn't open to think and learn and grow and so forth. Uh, that's a kind of arrogance. It doesn't have to be this boast of thinking that we're the smartest, thinking that we've got it all, thinking that we're the brightest, the best in the class, or whatever it might be. That is arrogant. But arrogance just may simply be kind of a stubborn attitude. I'm not going to yield in any way about anything, and I'm not going to learn anymore. Confidence, confidence is the idea I've got enough knowledge, I can move forward. Jesus said, let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. In other words, he said there are things coming that are going to challenge us, but when you look at it, believe in me, trust me, place your confidence, and then we can move forward. It's not until we have confidence that we can put one foot in front of the other. And that's confidence. That's not arrogance, that's confidence. And often that's based on experience, and it's often based on trust. Finally, question number 6. When is it acceptable not to do good, even though you know what it means to do it? In other words, is it ever the right thing not to do what you believe to be right? Generally the answer is there's not a time, you know, doing right is always right. That's true, and that's enough. But I think there are some complexities within shades of what I'm talking about here that may take it in a little bit different direction, a little innuendo or whatever you want to call it in this, would be the idea of sometimes we can be doing the right thing, be doing basically right, but end up doing harm by doing it. It's not so much doing the thing as it is the how of doing it. I've used the illustration before. I had a friend that, went to church services with us regularly and everything for a long time. And one Sunday I got up and he didn't go with us that Sunday. And I just got so aggravated, probably more aggravated than I had to go, and he didn't have to go. We were kids. And I've told you this story, but when we got home from church service, I leaned over to my dad and I said, what's that passage in scripture about not forsaking the assembly? He said, what? I said, the one about not skipping church. And he said, you talking about Hebrews 10:25? And I said, yeah, that's the one. Hebrews 10:25. I got out of the car, saw my friend out in his yard, and I hollered at him, you better run in and read Hebrews 10:25. I wish he'd gone with us. But my point is that I was abusing. Was the passage correct? Yes. In all likelihood, he should have gone with us. But I was right but wrong. So sometimes the idea of right, and I'm kind of drawing that into the sense of good, can seem like the good thing, but it is not necessarily the good thing. There were better approaches I could have used, but I was young and ignorant, and I'll excuse myself for a moment. When you know what it means to do it, do the very best you can when you know what is good. James says, when you know what God is trying to do with you, do what God is trying to do with you. When you know what is right, do the right thing as best you can. All right, friends, that puts us pretty much at the end of our study this evening. I want to thank you for being a part of it and sharing this. For those of you that stayed all the way through, one or two of you dropped out, got lost on the way. No, I'm just kidding. Anyway, I'm glad that you are listening. I'm glad you're with us. I hope this is something that gives you some food for thought as we press forward in this, and hopefully this one didn't glitch this evening. Didn't look like it did. I didn't get anything that said it was dropping things this week. So hopefully this one worked a lot better than last week. We'll plan for next week. Hopefully we can be at building. Those of you who can possibly be there will be at the building. It'll still be at 6 o'clock. We'll be moving to 7 o'clock in March. We'll move it to 7 o'clock. So you have to get your supper in before you come down there at that point. So get your supper in, be down there at 7 o'clock in March, and we'll share that time together then. But next week, we'll still be at 6 o'clock. So plan to be at 6 o'clock. Are you getting confused? We'll try to put it in email and make it all straight and remind you later. But next Wednesday evening, 6 p.m., hopefully we can be at the building and have our class there. I'll look forward to seeing your smiling faces Sunday morning, and we'll look forward to having a great day together on Sunday. Keep the people in prayer that you know we need, and we'll look forward to great opportunities ahead. Thank you so much for being with me this evening, and I hope you have a great Wednesday night. Thank you all.